I want to ask you something and I need you to answer it honestly. When something goes wrong at work, who fixes it? When a deadline is about to be missed, who picks it up? When a new person joins the team and needs to learn how everything works, who teaches them? When leadership needs someone they can count on, whose name comes up? If the answer to most of those questions is yours, I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes because what I'm about to break down is going to reframe something you have probably been calling strength your entire career. And it's going to explain a level of exhaustion that sleep has not been able to fix. The pattern has a name and it's called overfunctioning. And today we're going to talk about exactly what that is, where it comes from, and what it's costing you, and what you can actually do about it. I do want to start off by saying that this video is for informational and educational purposes only. It's not intended as a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of qualified professional with any questions you might have regarding mental health or workplace situations. Reliance on any information provided in this video is solely at your own risk. Let's get into it. All right, so before I define overfunctioning, I want to tell you what this conversation is not. This is not about working less hard. This is not about caring less about your job. This is not about becoming someone who does the bare minimum and calls it boundaries. The women I'm speaking to here today on this channel, they are not lazy, they are not weak, and they are not bad at their jobs. They are exceptionally good at their jobs, and that is precisely the problem. I spent years in the workforce in different sectors, and in every single one of those environments, I watched the same pattern play out over and over again. The most capable woman on the team quietly became responsible for more than their job description ever outlined. Not because anybody sat them down and told them that this is their assigned duty, but because majority of the time these capable people attract the work just like a clean desk attracts clutter. And now that I'm studying industrial organizational psychology, which is a scientific study of human behavior in the workplace system, I keep finding research that puts language to patterns I've lived through and experienced myself through years without being able to name them. Overfunction is one of those patterns, and once you see it clearly, you generally cannot unsee it. So let's define it properly. Overfunctioning is a systematic pattern where one person consistently absorbs responsibilities, problem solving, and emotional labor that belongs to the broader team or to the leadership because the system around them has failed to ever build and distribute the load fairly. So I want to say that again because the second half matters, because the system around them never built distributed load fairly. So this is not about a personal choice. This is not about being a pushover or knowing how to say no. Overfunctioning is a system response. It happens when capable people exist inside a broken, unbalanced system, and they fill the gaps because someone has to. In IO psychology, we have a specific term for what happens to the person doing the filling. It's called role overload. Role overload is what occurs when the demands consistently placed on one individual exceeds the resources. So the time and the support, the authority and the energy. They are given to meet them. Think about that definition for a moment. The demands exceed the resources, not because you're ineffective, but because you need better time management. But because the math was never designated to balance in your favor, and here's the part that makes overfunctioning particularly difficult recognizing and even more difficult to stop. It doesn't feel like a problem when it's happening. It feels like competence. It feels like being needed. It sometimes even feels like purpose because you're good at it. And the people around you keep telling you so. Now, I want to get specific because overfunctioning affects a lot of people, but it shows up with a particular intensity in high responsibility women who come up through the military, service, federal employment, or even in contractor environments. And this is not a coincidence. Those environments share a set of cultural values that are generally admirable on the surface. Mission first, service before self, reliability, discipline, excellence. The team counts on you. Those values build something real in you. I'm not diminishing them in any way. I live them. They shape me in ways I'm still unpacking. But here's what those environments also taught you. Sometimes explicitly, often implicitly. Asking for help signals weakness. Struggling visibly is more dangerous to your career than struggling quietly. The mission or the agency or the contract comes first, always, even when it costs you. And every time you operated by those rules and succeeded, you got rewarded. A strong evaluation, a letter of recommendation, a reputation, a promotion, more responsibility. Which brings to the mechanism that it keeps overfunctioning in place. Every time you stepped up, you got recognized. Every time someone else didn't step up, the work quietly shifted your way because everyone knew you would handle it. Leadership leaned on you because leaning on you worked. The system did not malfunction. It worked exactly the way it was designed to. It found its most load-bearing wall and it leaned. You just weren't briefed on what that leaning would eventually do to the structure. There's also something else happening that IO psychology calls emotional labor. Emotional labor is the management of your own feelings and the feelings of the people around you as part of your job function. And research consistently shows that women, particularly women in high responsibility roles, carry a disproportionate share of that. In federal and military environments, that labor is almost never acknowledged in a job description. It is expected, absorbed, and invisible. This invisible labor is still labor. It still costs you, just you never get credit for spending it. All right, let's talk about the costs because I think a lot of women know something is wrong, but they haven't fully accounted for what it's taking. Physically, chronic role overload is associated with elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep, immune suppression, and increased cardiovascular risk. Your body is keeping score in real time. So the headaches, the tension, the getting sick every time you finally take a day off. Here's some stats that I found alarming. Mental health, higher risks of depression disorders, 180% increase, anxiety and feelings of detachment. Physical health, increased risk of hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular issues like stroke or heart attack. Occupational safety, working more than 60 hours per week significantly increases the risk of workplace injuries and accidents. If you've had any of these symptoms, it may be your nervous system communicating what your professional culture told you to suppress. Professionally, this one is painful, and I want you to hear it clearly. Overfunctioning often stalls careers rather than advancing them. When you are a person who holds everything together at the current level, leadership has very little incentive to move you up. You become too valuable exactly where you're at. The reward for doing everything is getting to keep doing everything with a slightly nicer title and the same impossible load. Women in federal careers especially know this pattern. You get the responsibility without the rank, the workload without the authority, the accountability without the resources. Rationally, the people closest to you get whatever is left at the end of the day of carrying everyone at work. And for most of the women I'm describing, what's left is very little. The patience is gone, the presence is gone, the vision of you that your family, your friends, and your own inner life deserves, she's running on fumes by 6 p.m. So even before you hit the door to go home, she's gone. And then there's a cost that is the hardest to name, the identity cost. When your entire sense of professional self is built around being capable, dependable, and indispensable. Who are you when you stop, when you're sick, when you're burnt out, when you simply cannot carry it anymore? The question is terrifying for a lot of high achieving women because somewhere along the way, and this is a part I really need you to hear, doing so became being. Producing became existing, and the thought of doing less started to feel like becoming less. This is not the truth, but it is an incredibly convincing lie that overfunctioning tells you every single day. Okay, so what do we actually do with this information? I want to be straight with you. I'm not going to give you a quick fix because overfunctioning is a systematic pattern, not a personal productive problem. You cannot organize our positive mindset your way out of a system that was built to take more than it gives. Mental willpower will be required to make a change, but in a strategic way. We'll start by naming what is actually yours, not defensively, but rationally. Let's get precise about which responsibilities are actually in your job description, which ones you absorbed gradually over time, and which ones generally belong to someone else or to the system itself. You cannot set a boundary around something you haven't identified. Most overfunctioning women have never done this audit because they've been too busy moving forward and fast. So let's slow down long enough to see the full picture of what you're actually carrying. The second is strategic visibility. One of the reasons overfunctioning continues unchallenged is that people above you often do not see the full scope of work that you're managing. Not always because they don't care, sometimes because the culture actively rewards invisibility and punishes compliance. So I'm not suggesting you go to your supervisor and vent. Here's what I'm suggesting. This is going to be more deliberate. So you're going to start making your workload visible. Document what you're managing. Find appropriate professional ways to surface your capacity in conversations with leadership. Not complaining, but providing documents, evidence basically of what you're doing. And there's a meaningful difference between those two things, and it matters for your career. The third is to be genuinely curious about the belief underneath the behavior and ask yourself this question: what do I believe will happen if I do less? Or if I say I don't have the capacity right now, if I stop being the person who holds it all together, what is the fear underneath that? Because for most overfunctioning women, the answer to the question is deeply personal. It connects to your identity, to your worth, to survival strategies that worked in environments where being indispensable felt like the safest way to be. Understanding that belief, really understanding it, is where the actual work begins. And it's worth doing, not because carrying everything is wrong, but because you deserve to choose what you carry rather than having it chosen for you by a system that benefits from your silence. If any part of this video felt like it was describing your life, I want you to know something. You're not broken. You're not bad at boundaries. You're not too sensitive. You are a highly capable woman who has been operating inside systems that were built to consume more than they return. And you've been doing it with a level of excellence and professionalism that most people around you couldn't sustain for a week. So, recognizing that pattern, really seeing it clearly, is not a small thing. It is genuinely the first step towards something different. This channel exists because I've spent years living this before. I didn't have the language to name it. Industrial organizational psychology gave me that language, and I want to give it to you in a way that's grounded in real experience, not corporate jargon or textbook theory. It is something that resonates with me, and I hope it does with you as well. And I would love for you to subscribe. Every week I break down a new piece of workplace psychology that I think will be helpful to make work make more sense for that specific kind of woman watching this channel. And before you go, drop a comment and tell me, what is one responsibility that you're carrying right now that you know deep down was never actually yours? You don't have to have an answer just yet. Maybe just something to think about for the next time. And I'll see you in the next one.